Either this means nothing, or this is more Ryomen Sukuna glaze. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here from Fat Stupid 2. Have it on me and keep it on me at all times. Real fun fact, I have 15 minutes to tell you my thoughts on the recent statement by Gei Akutami about the nature of Mahoraga's strength and its consistency, yet inconsistency, and just tackle it in terms of like, does it actually make sense? Is this kind of like an external retcon? This, that, and the third. So let me start this 15-minute timer right now. If I can find it, please. So, Mahoraga is apparently equal at base for everybody, right? Megami's Mahoraga, Sukuna's Mahoraga, and Yuka's Mahoraga all started out at the exact same point. According to Miyamura, who translated a Gege statement that coincides with the release of Volume 3. Also, Volume 3 came out with, like, animation by Mappa, apparently. I've seen clips from that, and I've heard enough sources say that was actually, like, a real thing, so bada bing, bada boom. But with that being the case, by Miyamura, Gege, there is no difference in power between the respective Mahoraga belonging to Megami, Sukuna, and Yuka. However, due to the prolonged nature of the battle, Yuka's Mahoraga ultimately emerged as the strongest of the three. Now, initially, when I first heard this statement, I was like, does that make any sense? And it kind of does if we look at Mahoraga. Notably, one of my main complaints about Mahoraga, very specifically not this Mahoraga, but Sukuraga, was he just didn't really feel special, right? Like, ultimately, we'd only seen Mahoraga twice before, like once against Sukuna back in the original reveal of Mahoraga, again against Yorozu for a hot second, and here against Gojo in the battle with Gojo and Sukuna. But he wasn't any bigger. He didn't have any unique design aspects to him. In comparison to a lot of the other shadows that got some sort of buff by Sukuna using them, Mahoraga felt and looked and seemed the exact same. And that just felt really, really weird. Because Gege did go out of their way to establish that every other shadow gets some sort of benefit and buff from Sukuna being Sukuna and not Megami using the technique. Now, obviously, it was retroactively retconned, or, well, not necessarily, you could argue it's not a retcon, it was like a cleanup, but essentially, the reason Nue was so large was because it was fused with Orochi, but even then, Orochi, the snake alone, was not the size of Nue, so like, or the Giga Nue that Sukuna summoned, and obviously the Divine Dogs look different, Myriad Elephant was a thing, not Max Elephant, so like, Gege had set a precedent of the 10 Shadows changing while under Ryomen Sukuna's influence, but Mahoraga stayed the exact same. And that's kind of always felt wrong to me. But if they are really all meant to be the same, Mahoraga is basically set and can only grow via adaptation. That's fine and doesn't necessarily contradict anything we've seen in the narrative so far, because realistically, all the Mahoragas are the same size. They all do kind of do the same thing. They all are at the same base. And notably, you could go through like a whole thematic thing of why Mahoragas all being the same actually like fits into Mahoraga's existence as the example or representation of humanity in the 10 Shadows. Like, there's a cool narrative pathway you can go down with all Mahoragas being exactly the same, but they change and grow based on the phenomena they are introduced to. Now, the second half of the statement, the idea that Yuka's Mahoraga ended up the strongest thanks to the phenomena it underwent. That one feels a little bit iffy, sticky, but I guess it kind of works. Notably, I think the main reason I was like iffy on this Mahoraga being the greatest Mahoraga by the end of the fight is because I feel like it wasn't introduced to the same level of insane phenomena that Sukuraga was. Like, we do have to remember, while Infinity, oh no, what the heck, man, gosh darn it. But while we do know that Infinity was introduced as a concept to be essentially a living, breathing barrier, this Mahoraga did literally evolve to overcome a paradox, right? Like, the manifestation of a paradox is what Mahoraga managed to overcome when it adapted to Infinity. Through very extensive exposure, mind you. Remember, Mahoraga's wheel spun 4 times after consistent interaction with Infinity, and then Blue, and then Red, and even, okay, to be fair, it only stopped there. It got adaptations of Red as well. But that's the thing. Mahoraga messed with a bunch of spatial interaction stuff. Meanwhile, as crazy and cool as legendary and jacked and juicy as Dabura was, he basically just introduced Mahoraga to light, and then more light, and then light that is immediately infused with, like, malice itself. So, like, you could argue maybe there is more complications, but I'd see the literal manifestation of a paradox and the ability to overcome that, not just at close range, but at A range through multiple separate adaptations, to be greater than the light adaptation. But I don't know, it could be due to the fact that there is an entire section of Maharaga's adaptation that we just don't get to see because the battle's cut off, right? When Maharaga's wheel just starts spinning continuously, I'm assuming that's the Mahoraga Gege's referring to, in terms of the Mahoraga that transcended literally anything and everything the previous Maharagas have been introduced to. Obviously, I'm not exactly mad, nor surprised, or blown away that the original Raga that we see all the way back in Shibuya, I'm not shocked that this guy wasn't the strongest, right? Like, he got introduced to basic cutting and then lit on fire. So yeah, it makes sense that he wasn't overall that strong. However, I mentioned back in the intro, this could all mean literally nothing, and or it's Sukuna Glaze. Why do I think it's Sukuna Glaze? If all Mahoragas are essentially the same at base, you guys remember a little something about Mahoraga's power, right? And how, seemingly enough, even with continuous adaptations, it can't, like, it can only adapt defensively and not necessarily offensively, with the weird exception of Spatial Slash because of being Sukuna Shadow specifically. That's a whole weird thing. But in terms of its actual physical stats, it doesn't seem to get, like, insanely strong. So, I want you to remember something. Mahoraga, with its sword, was able to cut Dabura, right? Was it the deepest of cuts? No, it literally barely did anything. And even as it started to beat Dabura over the head, it did make him bleed a little bit here and there. And it did do enough damage, but then Dabura literally locked in a little bit, and bada bing, bada boom, Mahoraga went from doing crazy amounts of damage to literally being unable to even touch Dabura again from that point. But still, Mahoraga, who is at base, the same as everybody other Mahoraga, was able to do damage with a sword. And even some just general physical hits. So, there's that. A strong archetype that, was able to take damage from Mahoraga, who, starts at the same base. They all have the same thing. And notably, the adaptations just seem to be defensive for the most part, as, obviously, the stat disparity here never disappears. And then on top of that, you know who else took damage from Mahoraga and its Sword Slash? Yeah, Satoru Gojo. Yeah, he was, actually genuinely cut by Mahoraga. Swung, Lord. Mahoraga swinging the sword and, gashing his chest open. Now, once again, just like with Dabura, it actually wasn't that deep of a cut. Gojo heals it off next chapter with the minimal damage that it actually did. This isn't the most impressive thing. But you know who didn't take damage? You know who didn't take a lick of damage from interacting with Mahoraga and its sword? Yeah, Sukuna. Sukuna didn't take a lick of damage at all. He literally blocks it, and the clothing he's wearing doesn't even get cut. And obviously we don't see him take any actual visible damage. And then notably, we see Mahoraga adapt in multiple ways, not only to just the Dismantle Slash, but then to a hit here. And it's also notably with the sword, as Sukuna goes on to note that the sword changed properties to actually have cursed energy reinforcement, not just positive energy, and it still didn't do anything to Sukuna. In fact, he reacts and blocks just in time. Well, no, the crazier thing about this, if we're doing a little bit of Sukuna glazing, a little Sukuna slopping, if you will, not only did it do no damage, but this isn't even Sukuna at full stats. Remember, this is 16 finger. It's technically 16 finger. I know we call this 15 finger Sukuna, but with Yuji being born with a finger, and then he ate 4, and then Jogo gave him 10. Technically, this is 16 fingers. It's a whole mess. But regardless, since this is 16 finger Sukuna in Yuji's body, we know it's not strongest, prime, top tier, full stat Sukuna. So this, in a weird roundabout way, the statement by Gege is just more Sukuna slop retroactively. Because Sukuna not taking any damage from his interaction with Mahoraga, meanwhile both Dabura and Gojo, two other of the strongest archetype, do take very clear, very visible damage from Mahoraga. This isn't even a debate. We literally see the blood fly out of Gojo's body and stain his face. And same thing for Dabura. We literally do see his face get quite literally slashed open. If only a shallow slash. I will still reinforce that. It is a shallow slash, but he does actually take damage. The two other strong archetypes take damage. A incomplete Sukuna takes no damage. However, nice little bit of glaze there. I'm going to now present the counter argument to the glaze on that. And it's the ever-consistent debate on whether or not Mahoraga actually adapts stats. Because notably, the only way this could be like Sukuna Glaze is if you go with the idea that Mahoraga doesn't adapt stats at all. It just has flat stats, and notably any of its adaptations just become defensive, or a way to bypass a certain defense, right? There's that. However, if you go with the idea that the further the wheel spins, Mahoraga's stats get at least somewhat better, if unquantifiably so. Notably, the only time Gojo and Dabura both take damage from Mahoraga, which is admittedly very, very rare. It happens once in terms of visual damage for Dabura, and by once I mean in this one chapter, and then literally only here for Gojo. Once again, you can literally see he heals off. Here. He heals off the damage literally next chapter and then proceeds to chill out for the most part from here. He wipes the blood from his face and everything. He's good. But this is a Mahoraga after 4 spins for both Dabura and Gojo. Gojo gets hit after the final wheel spin, and that allows Mahoraga to do damage to him, and Dabura gets hit specifically after 4 wheel spins to his basic light attacks, and then Mahoraga swings out and does damage to him. So, like, Sukuna only dealt or took no damage from a Mahoraga that hadn't adapted at all. Like, in fact, hold on, let me double check that though. Let me make sure he didn't adapt at all to this point. But essentially, I believe the one interaction, the 2 hits that Mahoraga lands on him, one is based on this initial hit, which does no damage, is pre any adaptations. It's just Mahoraga swinging out. And then this hit that comes after 1 wheel spin does come after only 1 wheel spin. So if you think Mahoraga stats increase, then this isn't like Sukuna Glaze. It's just, oh, okay, he didn't reach 4 spins yet. Bada bing, bada boom. He wasn't adapted at all yet. Bada bing, bada boom. He didn't do any damage. But if you think that Mahoraga stats don't change in terms of his like AP and his physicals and anything but his durability and his resistances, then this is Sukuna slop. Whichever you want to pick. I mean, do you like... Personally, I don't think... We're gonna be like, oh, Petzl, you Sukuna slop, and I can't help it. I'm gonna lean more towards Sukuna Glaze here, mainly because, 1, I know Gege, and 2, it doesn't necessarily make sense for Mahoraga to adapt stats, because if it did, Dabura and Gojo both wouldn't have been able to freestyle on it in the way that they were. At least in my honest opinion, right? I will give Meguraga a pass, right? Because Meguraga had barely any time to exist, got 2 clean hits in, and was done. And notably, I say clean hits, Sukuna blocked them both, right? That's one thing. Meanwhile, this Mahoraga gets 4 separate adaptations, then just to get bullied by Gojo, right? Like, if it was really comparable to Gojo in any mean, shape, or form, this probably wouldn't work. Remember, when Gojo is hitting Mahoraga here, the blue effects aren't working anymore. Because Mahoraga's already adapted to blue and infinity, so, like, nothing extra is happening here. Mahoraga's getting knocked back by regular Gojo hits. I mean, Gojo's presumably amping himself here, but the extra special effects of blue aren't being taken into account here, and Mahoraga gets knocked back. And notably, it still takes... even if not visible damage, it is still clearly struggling. So there's that. So I don't think Maho would adapt stats, because notably its wheel doesn't spin after this point. It doesn't spin again until Sukuna literally tells it to spin. It's like, hey, lock in, twin. And same thing for Dabura, right? Mahoraga just doesn't get to, like, do anything after this point. Dabura just starts viciously blitzing it over and over and over again, to the point where Mahoraga can't even perceive Dabura anymore. And by the time Dabura gets to a point of like, okay, I still need to do something even further to evolve to actually destroy this thing, Mahoraga still doesn't land another hit. So we don't know if its stats increased after the next wheel spin and the next regeneration. So, like, it's hard to tell. Personally, I'm fine with it being Sukuna Glaze, because Sukuna still being at least, like, having the best physical body in the verse still fits his narrative entirely, right? Like, him just having the best stats in the verse is fine. That's not the most insane thing. If anything, this statement only just reinforces that fact that we've kind of known for a while already. However, if you want to say that it doesn't necessarily matter, Dabura, Gojo, and Sukuna are just all made relative in terms of stats because of this statement, like, all Mahoragas are the same. But even then, though, like, it is weird, because that's an incomplete Sukuna, he still takes it on there. I don't know. I say this, once again, more so reads to me as Sukuna Glaze, an interesting way to, like, differentiate Mahoraga even more from the rest of the 10 Shadows, right? Mahoraga's already different in a bunch of different ways from the rest of the 10 Shadows technique, but this is a way to, like, further reinforce that differentness on, like, a thematic and interaction level. This is a good way to sort of isolate the strongest archetypes even further, again, because they aren't facing this, like, variable. Mahoraga does get to fully embody that idea that the community has latched onto, the idea that Mahoraga is a test for the strongest archetype. So, aka, if your character can beat Mahoraga, they can probably at least somewhat wiggle their toes in the strongest tier. And it's funky, though, because, like, there are some characters who definitely aren't in the strongest tier who could beat Mahoraga just because of how Mahoraga exists. Angel would one-shot this thing. But regardless, there is an interesting point for Mahoraga being consistently equal. Do I think this matters or changes any matchups? Not really. Like, ultimately, I spent so much time talking about, like, oh, how does this interact with, like, the Sukuna and the Gojo and the Dabura of it all? Mainly because those 3 are the ones that are consistently in contention with each other. But this doesn't change anything on the lower end of the verse. It's not like, because Mahoraga is all the same, X character is now able to do something to the strongest. That's not a thing. Ultimately, Sukuna and Gojo and Dabura still stand so far above literally everybody else that Mahoraga getting like weirdly enough more balancing doesn't undo the previous narrative balancing. It just makes it more applicable to their interactions. So for my Sukuna Sloppers out there, if you want to take this as Sukuna Glaze, go ahead. The argument's there. You just gotta prove that Mahoraga doesn't have stats, which I feel like is relatively easy to prove. If you want to take this as nothing, just flatlining everything, also fine. For my Gojo Glazers out there, for my Dabura demons? I don't know what to call you. But regardless, my Karma creamers out there, you can do whatever you want with that. And then for anyone who's just like remotely intrigued in how Mahoraga works, there you go. We got more information about Mahoraga. So overall, I feel like we all win here. And notably, I don't feel like too much changes. But it is an interesting point that Gege saw all the discussions surrounding the different Mahoragas. Like, yeah, of the few statements I can give out here in this final volume release, this is one of the ones I want to hammer in so everybody knows the truth. But with that being the case, I am out of time. So if you made it all the way in this video, please leave the same wheel the same wheel in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you hit that lethal notification so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, you're going to have a page down below. You support me for as low as one. Get them on, things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. Also, now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include live reactions for this exam to review, ad reactions of all my videos, early ad free access to my videos, early ad free access not just all my videos on the main channel, but all my videos on the second channel. That got a reaction link in the description down below, along with a link to my Twitch, where I stream every Friday, 8 p.m. ES Tizzle. On top of that, I do a link to my Ko-Fi down below. You drop 5 views on a short video, 20 views on a long video, or any views at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. And if you're ever wondering what a short video is, it's videos like these. These 15-minute videos that are like fun and quick and easy to record. That's what these are. You get that for 5 beats. But regardless, I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Other Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Riddle 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, J2MA, Buddha Uda, Yuki Ally, Grim, Ollie, The Boy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Tim Thomas, Kaving, OrXN, Dead Mean, Keon Stewart, Edwin Idwinoba, Straw, Antavius Mitchell, Superflame Zero, Weary Exile, Alex Kenny, Todd, The Practical One, Landon Clapwick, Heath Nelson, CAET, Plan Crone, Brandon Payne, Black Sage, Multi-Batman Superman, Zalims, Joe Bean, Sleepin' John, The Young Family Pastel Pandora, Mosity King DKG, Akolade Babatunde, Union Eye, Funny Dude, Athenzi Shear, Sino King, Sheesh King, CCC, Enzo, Kitty Liddy, Axis XC, RTM, Gangatron, Praise the Sun, Striker Man, Magic, Enzreen Bonnet, Scion, John Malcolm, Black Doctor Strange, and Donovan McIntosh. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our line art tier patrons: Dread Zoan, Kevin Encarnaus, Midnight Lord 21, and Sean. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our ink tier members: Shrimp the Fourth Shrimp 06. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our digital art tier members, J Warrior and AZ Void. I'd like to give a final thank you to our colored art tier patrons, Walking Munoz and Walking Munoz.